All right. I had to hit record mid-sentence because we were starting to get furious. I was starting to get mad. Not at you, at society. And I was like, record.
Perfect.
But let's... No, you know what? Fuck it. I was going to like lure people in because I have some jiu-jitsu questions and stuff like that. But I'm like, no. I have faith in my fucking audience that we can open hard, and then we'll reward them with jiu-jitsu. Say what the fuck you just told me. So you just opened your gym again after COVID. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's huge. I'm so glad to see good people still surviving, you know, and not just like the horrible people that are like, oh, I guess he won another gold medal. Cool.
Yeah, cool.
So this was really nice to see, but tell me about the message that you got on your Facebook this morning.
Yeah, so everybody kind of knows me for like the jiu-jitsu stuff. Not as many people know that like I come from a family of activists.
Yeah.
Like my aunt was huge with prison reform, and she was working with Stanley Tookie Williams, who was the founder of the Crips, to work on more rehabilitation projects and reformation projects as opposed to punitive things for
holy shit,
you know, for major crimes.
Which, by the way, is what fucking prison is supposed to be for. It's not supposed to be sit in this cage and then leave worse off than you were. Where then like people leave and a lot of them are fucked. Especially when we talk about how the majority of prisoners are in jail for nonviolent drug offenses, and then they get out, they can't get a fucking job, they can't do anything. It's like, all right, I guess I go back to fucking stealing drugs, and then everybody else is like, well, look who's back in jail. It's like, well, the system's broken, guys. Like, I'm about personal responsibility, but also we should be fucking educating people in prison. We should be, anyway. Yes.
No, I 100% agree. Like, this is exactly how you end up with career criminals.
Yes.
Because, you know, like any other career you do, you know, I'm delved, like, thankfully I have a college degree, but I'm delved in jiu-jitsu. So pretty much anything I do that ventures off is going to probably have some sort of tie to my jiu-jitsu career. So if your career is tied to crime, and when you get let out, quote unquote let out, but when they finally release you and you have no place to go, no resources to be able to indoctrinate yourself back into life, what are you supposed to do? You're like, fuck it, I'll go back to jail.
Right, you know? Totally. I want to start marketing jiu-jitsu that way, by the way. Jiu-jitsu, it's one step above a life of crime.
Well, shit, with half the people that we've been dealing with and seeing outing themselves these days, it's like literally... It might as well be, but
dude, yeah. So, okay. So that's awesome, by the way. So I had no idea that you came from a family of activists.
Dad was in the civil rights movement the whole night. He marched with Martin Luther King, John Lewis. He did the sit-ins. He's the reason I get to vote this year. Funny how that works.
Oh my!
He marched on Selma the whole night. So,
dude, that's
this is in the blood.
So growing up like this, oh boy, we're not going to talk about jiu-jitsu. We are. But I'm so fascinated by this because like growing up like this, were you kind of taught at a young age, like this is what's up, this is why we fight? Because I've talked about on the show, I actually talked about this when all the racism started to pop up, about, you know, how every black kid has to get like the talk that like white kids never got. And I was really lucky. My teacher was this woman named Melissa Harris Perry, who used to host a show on MSNBC. She was a little too radical for their network, but she would do things like, I remember being in studio for this, and it was one of the most jaw-dropping experiences I've ever had, where, you know how if you turn on CNN or MSNBC, or for the most part, it's like a black man was murdered, to comment 2 white academics from the New York Times, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
So what she did for her show, I mean, she would have celebrities on her show and shit like that, but what she did after Trayvon Martin was killed was she brought on 4 black teenagers, which was unfucking heard of. Yeah. And these were the sweetest, most well-spoken, fucking funny, self-aware kids. And they just talked about the talk. They talked about how, yeah, from when they were old enough to look older than they are, being told this is how you act around the police. This is how you act around white people. I mean, shit that I said this on the show. I got arrested once when I was a teenager, and I asked the cop to drop me off at the corner so my parents didn't see, and he did it, which like, yeah, like I know. So anyway, so the what the fuck was I talking about? Okay, so yeah, so I'm assuming you got the talk in the sense of like, watch out for this stuff, but was it also sort of peppered with like the hopefulness of activism, or the kind of like, hey, it's also our like, did they pitch it to you like it's your responsibility to be speaking out, or were they like, hey, we're just doing this to fucking survive? Like, what was the attitude growing up?
So, well, first and foremost, I got real history.
Yes, that's huge.
They gave me a contrast. They gave me, this is what you're going to learn in school. Like, they primed me before I was even in fucking school. Like, they're like, oh, you're going into third grade, so you're going to learn about the Egyptians, da-da-da-da-da.
You're going to learn about this Christopher Columbus asshole.
You know what I'm saying? They're like, you're going to have a white Egyptian guy with a headdress on your social studies book. That's all bullshit. You know, so like they kicked it to me straight. And then when it came to imperialism, when it came to slavery, when it came to what Columbus was really doing and what he really did once he got over, all of those things, like they were kicking me everything, all the history. And then within America, like my dad being in the civil rights movement, he was there. So
crazy.
There's what I read, and then there's what my dad lived through.
Right.
And those kinds of things became like the benchmark for how I would approach life. And that's how I've approached even like social injustice these days. Is I'd rather educate everybody.
Yep.
And I can go off of personal experience instead of using hyperbole and just guessing or taking just necessarily what I read from a book.
Isn't that frustrating, man? When like, and that's how me and you became friends, which is I was watching you, the way you posted and the way you spoke on social media. And I remember being so heartbroken where with the jiu-jitsu community, I really thought I found like, this is the group. This is the group of guys, you know, like I've been burned before.
Finally have like-minded individuals.
Yeah. And I remember when I first started to get shit and unfollowed and stuff like that, what was so frustrating for me, which I'm sure is like quadrupled for you, was I wasn't saying anything radical. That's what was so fucking nuts, you know? And like, and you reach a point, especially when, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I really do like the way you speak about it. And, you know, to you, drawing from history, drawing from personal experience, drawing from your parents' personal experience, I can't imagine the frustration of you putting out this like nuanced points essentially about you and people who look like you surviving and just getting, well, maybe the protesters, and just when they're just not listening. I can't, and good on you for pushing through, but like, I mean, what's that fucking like? I'm sure it's better in person than it is on social media, but do you still remain hopeful?
Yeah, absolutely. I remain hopeful because my family remains hopeful. Like I asked them, so the first time I spoke at one of these things, like I've been doing this work since I was like 10 years old. I was doing work with my aunt, my dad, my mom. I've been doing it forever.
This is so cool. By the way, when you're telling me this stuff, I'm gushing more than like huge celebrities we've had on the show, where like I was like, oh, I didn't know that about your family. Like it's so much more exciting to me, where it's like, oh, they were fucking there, you were there. Like, okay, sorry, keep going.
You know, no, like it's real though. I think it's a different perspective because people don't realize in the fight for equality, it's not black supremacy. It's literally a fight for everybody.
Yes.
But it's like, let's help black folks catch up. Let's help marginalized people catch up. And then everybody's on the same playing field.
That's what's so fucking frustrating, is that, nobody's saying, like, Black Lives Matter is not Wakanda forever. It's
No.
literally just saying like matter, like treat us the same. And yeah, you're right, dude. Like, I mean, I've seen so many marches when I was in New York, and I was like one of the first people down at Occupy and stuff like that, where all of the black groups, the LGBT groups, like all of them came together because they know what it's like to be oppressed. And guess fucking what? You know, I mean, we saw footage of black people protecting cops. You know, we saw footage of, I remember during Occupy Wall Street, like seeing protesters plead with the cops, just being like, dude, we're fighting for you guys too. You guys are getting fucked over by the system. You're not getting fucking paid enough. You're being put out to do bullshit jobs that half of you don't want, you know?
Exactly. Everybody's going through it, and nobody wants to have a job where everybody just vilifies you. So at the same time, if for all those good cops, those quote unquote bad apples that are ruining it for everybody, they're trying to, like, we're trying to fight for them to not have the bad apples or have some sort of justice so that everybody's okay. We don't hate cops. We hate bad cops.
Yeah.
You know?
Dude, I've said this before, where it's like, if there was someone going around murdering women using incredibly technical jujitsu, the jujitsu people wouldn't be like, not all jujitsu. We would be like, we have to find that guy.
We have to handle this business.
Yes, because this does not make us look good. Whereas like, if I'm a cop, I said this about the war. I'm like, speaking out against an unjust war is as pro-troop as you can get, because I'm like, I don't want troops getting murdered or killed for bullshit. Like, you know, it doesn't mean that I fucking hate them. Like, same with the cops, right? Same with everything. Okay. Continue. I'm getting so excited, and I'm also like, please don't be the white liberal screaming over your black guest. I'm so excited though. This is fucking, I've wanted to have this conversation for so long. So okay, so you were talking to your parents.
So I was talking to my parents, and from childhood I talked to about them. Talked to them, and they would just give me the contrast in what you're going to be educated on and what is, and they dive deeper. You know, I'd learn about all kinds of the ugly that is woven within the country. And then with my dad, you know, we progress into the civil rights movement. He's telling me, like, this is what the movement's for. This is what we're doing. This is what we have received since slavery. This is what we haven't received. And this is what we're working towards, because it's gone from de jure racism to de facto. And for the people that don't know, de jure is like basically by law. Yeah. That's like it's woven like legal segregation and legal discrimination, as opposed to de facto, where it's like I still have people like giving me bad service in restaurants because they assume I don't tip. Right. You know, I'm like, I own my own business and I've been traveling the world for how long, but still they don't know that. They just look and assume something.
Right. So I actually didn't know the definitions of that. But I just remembered when I was a stoned, legitimate piece of shit 16-year-old, and we would go to Denny's and we didn't have money to tip. They would always put us in the back, and I was like, huh, this is where all the black people are. This is funny, weird. How that works. And it was like fucking Denny's in like, I don't know, 2002, like not the 60s. So the point I wanted to hit, and I think where you were going with this, is when you were talking about how you haven't given up hope because of your parents, because this is really huge too, especially on Twitter, or sorry, on social media in general, because it's so easy that like bullshit, like, oh, the angry black guy, which by the way, you have the right to be.
Oh, you're damn right.
Yeah, like very angry. But it's also, I think, important for people, just so they don't fucking give up, to hear people like you and your parents talk about how you do have hope. So talk about what you were going to say with that.
So my parents, like, they stay hopeful. Like the first time that they had a protest in our area, there were about 5,000 people there, and that's the first one that I spoke at. Yeah. And so I speak at this thing, and mind you, like, there's police in riot gear. There's a sniper on the roof of City Hall, Jesus, looking at everybody. They have a tank. I'm like, this is what is unnecessary.
It's a little much.
We have 5,000 some odd people here and hordes of kids. Right. So obviously everybody's doing just fine. And if parents feel safe enough to bring their toddlers to this thing, there's nothing going on. Yeah. So we So it actually was pretty cool because during the event and what you were bringing up about Occupy,
yeah,
the event, we had a moment where, and I'll send you a picture of it on Instagram, and then you can post it.
Yeah.
But there was a picture where all of us are lined up and kneeling, and there's literally a straight line in between them and a front line of law enforcement in riot gear. And all we're doing is screaming, kneel, kneel, kneel. All we're asking for is kneel. We're coming in peace.
Yeah.
Nobody moves. And I look at one of the officers and I go, hey, you know this isn't about you, right? And then he goes, and he looks at me and he nods. And I was like, yes, this is obviously about bigger issues. This is even past just police. This is a systemic problem. And we're just looking to be able to help you and help ourselves.
Yep.
And so he was just like, and so then somebody else started walked over, because I had mentioned I was a business owner in the speech. And so he tapped me on the shoulder and was like, what kind of business do you run? And I was like, I run a jiu-jitsu academy. So he starts asking me like, okay, well, I know there's systemic issues, but what's the deal with like training? What do you think that the officers should do? So I laid out my ideas for police reform.
Yeah.
And the officer taps his buddy on the shoulder.
Oh my God.
Points at me and is like, and they both start nodding like this dude gets it. And I was like, can I shake your hand? And the guys, like, they slowly not, like, shake their head no. Yeah. And I was like, are you under command? And they were like, yep. I was like, but you get it though. And they were like, yep. And they just got little smiles on their faces. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so it was like a good little example for everybody else. So now fast forward, these guys are kneeling. Finally, after probably 3 hours of us on our knees, one of the officers kneels. Oh. And everybody just erupts in cheer.
Yep.
And so then we go back and we're like, thank you. We're all screaming, thank you. Meanwhile, there's these super radical, crazy white boys that start screaming at the cops, like, you're pigs, you're assholes.
Yep.
Fuck you for what you're doing. And so the group of us leaders of the pack, black folks, walk over to him and we envelop him. We circle him and we go, we're not dying for you today. And we grab him and we set him back. And then we all just talk to him and we're like, calm the fuck down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'm like, we understand and we feel your, understanding of this, or what understanding you feel you have. Like, we thank you for it. We got this.
Yeah, dude.
We got this. Like, it's about damn time we finally get to talk and have somebody listen. So we're not going to have you ruin this by freaking the fuck out. And this is the stuff that's not on TV.
Yeah. And I saw so much of that down at Occupy, where it's like, there were times where white people would do really good things in solidarity, where it's like, hey, we need to make the front line because chances are we're not going to get the shit beat out of us on TV. You know what I mean? Like, again, when it came to like Occupy, but then there were other moments. Like, I remember being at a Trayvon Martin rally and his parents were there. And some of these same fucking Antifa fucks were there trying to take the mic from Trayvon Martin's family to be like, overthrow capitalism. And it's like, bro, not the time. Yeah. And again, this is what gets conflated. The concept of Black Lives Matter, of racism is abhorrent, of we need equal rights, of stop killing these people. All you need is one piece of shit trust fund white kid throwing a Molotov cocktail through a Starbucks, and suddenly that's the talking point. It's like, well, that's what Black Lives Matter does. And it's
that's like, all that straw man argument stuff. I'm like, it's not. I tell people, when I'm having these, like, going to these protests, when I'm speaking, when I'm going through all this stuff, people, I've had people like, you guys should take care of the violent protesters and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, have you ever been to one of the protests? And
nope.
Bar none, no. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. So I'm like, let's put this in perspective. Would any of you Joe Schmoes off the street try to coach me in a jiu-jitsu tournament or in an MMA fight? And they're like, of course not. And I'm like, why? And they're like, because I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, okay, so if you've never been to a protest, how the hell are you going to tell me what I'm supposed to do at a protest? Right. Just because of what you see on TV?
To be fair,
Like,
those kind of people probably would try to coach you. They'd be like, get up, fucking get up, do the Ric Flair chop. Woo!
Oh, that wouldn't work on me because I just black out.
But like and dude, you were giving me chills when you were talking about that moment you had with the cops, because I remember same deal for the NATO protests in Chicago, the Occupy protests, the trade, everything that I was a part of. The times that cheering happened wasn't if there was something violent, that was like people were scared and trying to shut it down.
Yeah.
The times that the cheering happened were always moments of solidarity.
Absolutely.
Always. Because that is what the majority of people want. So let's segue this into jiu-jitsu. I should just have you on my other podcast to keep talking about the activism stuff, because I could talk about this forever. I think we'll probably weave back and forth.
We'll make it happen.
But to start with the jiu-jitsu thing, it is kind of a political, I mean, it's a totally political question, which is, okay, so you get this comment on your Facebook that's essentially like, your gym's open. Yeah, gym's open. Good. Now finally, like, yeah, you'll stop talking about politics or whatever, which, by the way, ballsy fucking dumbass move. If this person knows you, I'm like,
yeah,
like, are you gonna show up at the gym? So that was weird. But I want to talk about first, before we get into the mixing of quote unquote politics with jiu-jitsu, I really want to get this out because I was thinking about this today. Racism isn't a political issue. It's like
it's a people issue.
Yeah, it's a humanity, decent person issue. And I think that's what's so. Now, look, we live in a nation that somehow politicized a fucking virus, right?
Sure.
So it's like, okay, that's, I guess, what we do nowadays. But I think that's the thing. That's one of the things that's the most frustrating. Where they're like, oh, fucking classic Democrat or classic Black Lives Matter. Or it's like, guys, no, this should be everybody. And if you're a Republican, if you're a libertarian, if you're whatever, unless you're a fucking white supremacist, you should be proud and eager to be like, how the fuck do we shut down racism?
Yes, this is literally what's America supposed to stand for? Liberty and justice for all. What are we fighting for? Liberty and justice for all. So it's very odd that anti-movement people are like throwing up their American flags like it's like a symbol of we don't like you.
It's
or
bizarre, right? Yeah.
You know, like, or the Confederate flag, of course, but you know, or
that one's a little
like,
more on the nose, but yeah, I totally know what you mean.
Or, you know, like I'm not speaking on his politics per se, but even Trump saying MAGA loves black people. Yeah. So if MAGA loves black people, isn't that inherently saying that MAGA does not include black people? Like, we're like a separate group from that. So like, what do you mean? Yeah. Like, so these are those little things that people don't know. And so I'm like, this is a humanities concept. Like, you think about it like this. Do you believe in goodwill for your fellow man? Yeah. Of course, who the fuck doesn't? Right. Certain people don't, but for the most part, who doesn't? Now, what happens if you, out of the kindness of your heart, decide to donate your clothes to Goodwill, the organization? Right. They sell your shit for profit. Yeah. So that you can consider them opportunists. So in the same token that people want to try to disparage the BLM organization as opposed to the BLM movement, you can pretty much say the same thing. Like in the idea of the clothes, you could keep clothes in your trunk and then give them to people that you see on the street. You'd be helping people over an organization. Yeah. Instead of donating money to the BLM organization, which is just demonstrative bullshit, you could actually help people. And like all the people that have access to me, I'm like, I'm doing the work. I can show you exactly what to do. You have no excuse. Yeah, and I want to get into that. And yeah, that's a great fucking comparison. Yeah, like Salvation Army is just a bunch of like, that's a bunch of homophobic Santas. Right? But we can still like help people. But that's so huge because whenever people try to go, yeah, but this leader of Black Lives Matter, I'm like, oh, I don't give a shit. I don't even get into those arguments. I'm sure there are shitty people in that organization, just like there are shitty people in all organizations, right? Yes. And again, if we're if it's the same people who are going to defend
the police, then let's just call them some bad apples in Black Lives Matter, right?
Right.
But the concept of it is always what I'm like, if you have a problem with that concept, I just, and I think a lot of it comes from, and again, this goes to what you were saying with how we want to fight for all people and actual all lives matter, which is the fact that I think a lot of people who are against Black Lives Matter, against the protests, sincerely don't consider themselves racist. And I think are just fucking scared because everybody is being fucked over in this country except for like billionaires. Now they're not being fucked over to the same degree. I grew up poor, but I still had more privileges than a middle-class Black kid growing up, right? But I think that people get to this point where they're so scared for themselves, it becomes this, and this is what we sort of advertise in America, this sort of dog eat dog, competitive, I have to get mine, fuck everybody else. And so a lot of times race is just a fucking easy scapegoat.
Well, that competitiveness, it works both ways though, because even with everything we're going through, for every single time I'm like, yeah, I've dealt with, police brutality. Some white dude's going to be like, well, I had a bad run-in with the cops. I'm like, was it because you were an asshole or because of what you looked like?
I threw one beer at a police officer at a Hooters and I got shit for that.
I was poor growing up. Okay, was it because your family lived in a different area, went through certain issues that had nothing to do with your race? Or was it because your family had to deal with redlining and gerrymandering and they've never been able to get a fair shake since then?
Yeah.
There's levels to how people live.
Slavery and
exactly.
And I mean, that's, again, if we're talking about all lives matter, if I'm harnessing my little spiritual, we're all one, it's like when the first thing you think about when you hear someone say, that they're struggling or that they fear for their life or that they're poor or that if your first reaction is like, yeah, well, I was too, it's like, bro, like white or black. It's like all of it. When you hear that, you should be like, fuck, man, that's awful. Like,
well, that's a common decency thing. Like that's like
what I'm
narcissistic trait that everybody has in society, period.
Right.
If you say, if Jamie, you're like, hey, I went to this restaurant the other day and I'm like, hey, well, I make really good Italian. Why couldn't I just tell you like, oh, that's a cool restaurant. Where's it at? Right. And talk about you. Everybody wants to talk about themselves and they need to normalize not responding with a comment about themselves when anything happens.
Yeah.
White people getting killed by cops. Oh, well, more white people get killed by cops. Yeah. Okay. Because there's more white people.
Well, and also, by the way, I mean, for a decade, every time a white person is killed by a cop, I'm looking through Twitter and I'm like, where are all those fucking all lives matter people?
Exactly.
Where are all you know what I mean? Like, injustice is injustice. There's just more injustice when it comes to black people. Okay. So to segue this into this Facebook comment.
Oh yeah.
What is your fucking thought? I mean, we're talking about the narcissism. That's what reminded me where it's like the idea that my jiu-jitsu instructor is posting about people that look like him being murdered. And I'm like, hey, when you going to start posting some escapes from the armbar, buddy? You know
what I'm saying? I'm like, it's a very weird thing. Like I obviously have not been born with the trait to keep my mouth shut, as pretty much the world is starting to figure out now.
Right. We are all very lucky.
Yeah. So like my team is 100% with me and they know exactly how I get down. They know I welcome everybody, including, we actually had this talk at Open Mat over the weekend where we were like, including racists, bring them in so we can have conversations with them, and figure out where their heads are, like it doesn't have to be
conversations. I'm shaking.
What a concept. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Punch in the air for no reason. So we're like, we welcome everybody and we love everybody. And so it was just interesting. So this dude, like I've been posting everything. He's like a Trump thumper, which is fine. do whatever your politics are.
Sure.
I'm like, cool.
Me and
I'm not okay with.
Me and you had a disagreement, and it was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And like I hit you up privately, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Hey, have you thought about this?" And you go, "Have you thought about this?" And then we were both like, "Yeah."
Yeah. You know.
And like, I forget what it was. I think it was probably about like the Democratic establishment, and I'm like, I agree with you, but, and then you showed me your side, and I was like, yeah, like, and then we both left like, okay,
cool. At least I know where your head's at.
It was fucking great.
It's really not that difficult.
I know.
But people really want to be right over having resolution. And that's the biggest issue we have right now.
Do you think that almost, especially like in the jiu-jitsu community, and by jiu-jitsu community, it's like, it's a microcosm of Instagram at large. The idea that someone who knows you would be like, stop posting about black shit, I want to talk about jiu-jitsu, is so fucking horrifying to me that the only way I can think, not to defend him, but to be like, how did this even happen, is I wonder if Instagram and all of these dumb memes that we're seeing, it's just sort of like taken the humanity out of everything and it's turned it into a video game.
Oh, 100%. Everybody's stuck behind a screen.
Yeah.
So like you said, is it different when I'm talking to people that don't necessarily share my sentiments when I'm talking to them in person? Hell yeah. Because now all of a sudden somebody's like, oh, he's a first-degree black belt. I don't know if I'm going to do anything to piss him off or say the same things that I'll say online behind my keyboard.
Which,
and I'm like, bro, I'm not going to fight you. Right. Like, what the hell am I going to do? That's not going to prove my point, and that's definitely not going to solve social injustice.
Yeah, but it would be funny. However,
but it would be pretty entertaining.
It would be pretty hilarious. It would go viral. But what I was going to say though is that should just, if there is something that I can say online that I cannot say to a person's face, then I'm either wrong or a total coward.
Yeah, somebody the other day actually hit me up, and he's been saying a whole bunch of stuff about protesters or the peaceful guys need to handle the violent ones. And I was like, wait, that makes no sense though. That's a police officer's job. It's not a job it's nobody's job to actually even be a good human. So
I just pictured like knocking on like my black neighbor's door and just being like, hey, there's a protest going on downtown. You want to go take care of that?
Yeah, handle that. And so I was like, no, it's a police officer's job. And then he's like, well, no, but the problem is every time police try to do their job, like when they have to use force at those things, I was like, oh, at all the protests you've never been to? Okay, continue. Yeah. Every time they need to do it, somebody whips out their cell phone and then they can't do their job. I'm like, if you can't do your job properly because you're on camera, you probably shouldn't have that job, first of all. And then second of all, so are you saying that you want a civilian response to certain types of crime? So you do want to defund the police. Maybe you should join. Maybe you should go to a protest too.
Here's a pamphlet.
Yeah, right. Okay. We're meeting here Saturday at 1. But yeah, so like with this dude, I was just like, man, with the stick to sports guy, I was just like, bro, like, what are you doing? Like, first of all, I was like, racism and social injustice aren't, political issues. Yeah. So they're people issues that bleed into politics because of the nature of our country. Right. Second of all, this is my fucking page. Unfollow me. Right. Like, you don't need to be on my page.
The wildest fucking shit when they're like, I made a whole video about this. I'm like, you are coming here for free content that you can't think of yourself.
Yes.
And then you're demanding that I not talk about things that I actually care about. The balls.
Right? I'm like, I don't need to meet your approval. Like, I didn't know I had to get like a little report before you, and you check off what I get to post on my page.
Yeah, Frank can give you a stamp.
And then you're right. Like, exactly. I didn't get it this week. Sorry, guys. No podcast for me and Jamie this week. You know what I'm saying?
It's insane, dude.
And then the other part, though, too, the biggest part is it's always the people not doing anything that want to tell you how to do something or tell you what to do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the same with, jiu-jitsu in general, competing. I mean, because it's so easy from the sidelines. And again, I think it's projecting. I think that deep down they know they're not doing shit. They're part of the problem. So that I remember I used to make fun of people who voted when I didn't vote because I felt bad. I used to make fun of people who jogged when I was out of shape. I used to make fun of people who were sober when I had a drinking problem. Like, it's so you know, you're single and you're like, fuck those couples. You're in a relationship and you're like, fuck those single people, fuck Tinder.
Single, right?
And like, it's just projection. And this is why, I mean, this is one of the things that I would always say jiu-jitsu was so fucking good for, is it humbles you. It's a put up or shut up sport. You know, every time you're fucking on a roll and you're getting good, someone will bring you back down to fucking earth. And it was, you know, between that and for me, like mindfulness and meditation, like I was like, okay, this is what is like keeping me in check. So to see so many people sort of just blow past that. But again, dude, I think so much of it is it's just fucking ignorance. It's just ignorance, and it's people at the top disseminating bullshit. And I mean, you remember what it was like when you were a white belt and blue belt. I mean, shit, if fucking Marcelo Garcia was a super racist and that's what I came up with, I'm not saying I'd be super racist. I mean, hopefully I'd leave, but I would definitely be like, I don't know.
I don't know.
That was a bad example. I wouldn't be racist, you guys. Marcelo's not racist, everybody. Let's like it's who you surround yourself with when you're in we forget that white belts and blue belts are fucking scared and vulnerable. And when their coach is saying some bullshit, sometimes they're kind of like, oh, I mean, that is like a big position of power.
Yes, it's a very odd place to be, and it's kind of become like an awkward playing field in jiu-jitsu world, you know, like we're all like, leave all your shit at the door and then throw your gi on, throw your belt on, and then we all roll together and we all share in this commonality.
That's what I fucking,
that's what we thought.
And then George Floyd happened. Then I'm like, is the next competition going to be a fucking race war?
You know, and then people are like, play stupid games, get stupid prizes and all this other bullshit. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm like, now it's going to be gangland. Like, you know, I'm like, I've had to, like, I called out, like, what all sparked all this was when I called out Igor Gracie.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I saw this.
Yeah. So, well, because he deleted me. He blocked me on his socials and deleted all my comments. But
well, also to be fair, I don't follow Igor Gracie.
yeah. You're not missing much. Anyway, yeah, and I hope he hears that. Anyway, so
he also will not, because I doubt any of them listen to this show.
Yeah, more than likely.
Oh my god, fucking Henzo's still posting crazy shit. The MMA blogs the other day posted there was some video of some fucking white nationalist like beating up a woman protester, and Henzo from the verified account was like, oh, fucking feminists wanted equal rights, ha ha ha, he barely touched her. And I'm like, what is, like, I idolized these people.
It hurts my heart. That one hurts my heart.
Hurts my fucking heart. Anyway,
he's like, sorry, but he's like friends with my sensei the whole nine. So like, I've known him for a long time, and that felt bad. That made me feel bad.
I taught at Henzo's LA. And I was just like, oh, are we all garbage?
Like, right? Like, how does this work? You know? And so that's the thing. Like, I called out Igor because he was like, yeah, free police training. I'm going to hold workshops. And I was like, bro, like, all the police training in the world's not going to take the hate out of that dude's heart. Right. Like, at the end of the day, you know, jiu-jitsu is going to make you better at whatever you're at. So, like, if you're a bad cop, it's going to make you a worse cop. Because you're going to have another weapon. If you're a good cop, it's going to help you approach situations even more properly. So I'm like, that's not going to change anything. And basically he started, I see in the comments, he's like, I'm sick of this narrative about police brutality against blacks. Ha, 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 ha. So then I kicked him some comment and he goes, maybe
it's a weird place for a ha, 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 but all right.
Yeah. It was even weirder when he told me, maybe you should, stop dwelling on the suffering of your ancestors and focus on the future. And now I'm like, oh, you mean my ancestors like my dad? Or my ancestors like who? Me, that actually has gone through the shit myself? Like, who are you referring to? And it was at that point I made a post on my Facebook that ended up kind of going semi-viral. Yeah. That was basically like, stop hero worshiping black belts. Just because you have a black belt, just because you good at jiu-jitsu doesn't mean you're a good person.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then I explained a bunch about the George Floyd situation. I explained ways to remedy. And I was just like, there's people that you guys idolize that you don't need to be idolizing.
Yeah.
And so then that sparked a whole like,
well, and also
online.
yeah. I mean, I've gone back and forth with what to do with police training and jiu-jitsu. I want to go into depth with it with you because the old version of me, I forget who was on the show. I'm going to profile white people and just go with it was Tim Kennedy. Who, and there's lots of people who would make the argument that, because jiu-jitsu humbles you so much and because, you're getting beat up or whatever, it puts you in control of the situation. Now, where I kind of agree with that is where I agree with you is there are straight up racist cops that, jiu-jitsu is not going to erase the hatred, right? But there's another part of me that I'm like, well, I believe in programs to teach jiu-jitsu to like troubled youth or people with depression or whatever.
Like my nonprofit,
Yeah, exactly. And I do believe that can help. So maybe it's not going to change the guy like just a straight up hateful murderer, the guy who fucking murdered George Floyd, but there's probably a lot of deaths that happen, I'm going to assume, just from fucking panic and people not knowing what to fucking do and they're scared and jiu-jitsu would help them. I believe like Henner and Huron, I know, and like they've been talking a lot about like police training and I feel like with them, their hearts are in the right their hearts are in the right place. But like with Igor and like when it's people from that community, which kind of outed itself as being pretty fucking racist, or when like the posts like right in the heat of the protest that were suddenly like free training for cops. I'm like, that doesn't sound like you're shooting for reform. That sounds like you're like fucking like training them to deal. Like that sounds like a race war.
100%.
And so so on the positive note, because we can trash them all day, what would your idea be for how to use jiu-jitsu when it comes to law enforcement? Like what should we be doing? Because we got to do something, and I feel like jiu-jitsu could play a role. But yeah, what's your thought on that?
I think that it should be integral in police reform. I think that what should happen is with this whole like defund the police, which is kind of a misnomer. It's more of a reallocation of funding, certain amounts of the budget should go towards prominent martial arts facilities in particular cities and counties.
Yes.
And that money directly pays for tuition for law enforcement and first responders to go to these academies.
Yeah.
They learn their training, and then the instructors give psych evals, whether it's one per month or one per 3 months.
Brilliant.
And so then you're like, oh, okay, this guy gets tapped out all the time. Every time he gets tapped out, he spazzes and freaks out and goes balls to the walls the next time. Every time he's talking shit to people, if he's in a bad position, he spazzes.
Dude, that's so fucking funny.
If he doesn't,
it's brilliant because I never realized that being in jiu-jitsu long enough, we essentially, you're so right. We have been trained in fucking, being able to think about the second someone slaps my hand, I'm like, oh, I know all of your issues. I know you think
100%.
You're pissed at your girlfriend. You're like, the second someone grabs you, dude, I'm just like, oh, I know what's happening here. This isn't about me. This is about.
You start nogi and you're like, oh, this dude's a white belt for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, this dude's a black belt for sure. Like,
And by the way, like there are lots of cops who signed up because they grew up being like, I want to protect people. But like I had a friend who used to do psych evals for cops in New York City. And she was like, dude, some of the people that there was one guy, I remember she said, she was like, why do you want to be a police officer? Fairly simple question. And he goes, so I can finally get the respect I deserve.
Oh boy.
What? That's
Who kicked his ass in PE?
Dude, 100, totally. And also, like, that's what you said to the interview. Like, that was the good version. That was
what were you thinking?
That was the interview tucked in shirt version of whatever the fuck his horror show of a real answer is. Okay, so so they're getting training while they're
getting the so it leaks into a bunch of things. They're getting the training.
It's great.
Which just helps overall.
Yep.
Then you've got the psyche valves where you're like, hey man, this dude's a spaz and he's an asshole in the gym. Yeah. If I can't trust him in a controlled environment with no weapon, what's he going to do in an uncontrolled environment with a weapon?
Yep. And by the way, that's also what jiu-jitsu instructors should be doing with their class anyway. I mean, we've all seen, look, there are two roads the spaz student can go down. They either quit or they chill the fuck out, and when they get their purple belt, they laugh about what a fucking lunatic they used to be when they were a white belt. So yeah, why wouldn't we also do that with police officers? Yeah, especially if it's their job to uphold standards for society. So I'm like, I think that's the best way. And then on the other side, you know, you'll conversely have, hey, this guy, you know, he might be getting beat up by like my little 16-year-old phenom, you know, or, you know, he's getting beat up by these people. So he needs some work grappling. But he's super, super helpful. He's attentive. He shows up to class, you know, because of course you'd have to check off that in attendance you have to go to training. And, you know, he's helpful. He's always asking good questions. He's a guy that I trust. Give him a push. We can teach him the grappling. That's the easy part. Right. We can teach him the apprehension part. But if he's got a good head on his shoulders, he's going to go far and he's going to actually protect and serve. Dude, that's huge. And what's so frustrating to me is like that these conversations don't happen, because if I had to like unfollow Tim Kennedy on Instagram. He was lovely on the show and actually made a really good progressive point, because I asked him about this, where he was talking about and I've only heard like liberals talk about this, how you know, I think he phrased it like, you shouldn't have the white wrestler from Iowa, police officer, patrolling the South Side. You should have someone from that community. Well, that's another part of the police reform that I was talking about. Exactly. Well, and that's so huge. You got to patrol where you live. But again, if you just look at like his social media versus like your social media, you're like, well, that's a friendship that's never going to happen. But if you guys had this conversation where you pitched him that idea, and then you found out, and then he said his idea that you agree on. Tim's the type of guy where we would end up 100%. finding a common ground where we're like, this is probably the best solution to appease both sides, but to actually have some progress. And you look at social media, and it's like those conversations don't happen, because it turns into, and this isn't Tim, this is just in general, it turns into a very us versus them. You're either for masks or against masks. You're either for black people or you're for police officers. And it's like, you can't be both. You can be all of those things. All right, we're going to go over as it is, because that was fucking super important. I want to talk about something positive that came. I still have more political questions. I was like, to the jiu-jitsu questions. But in the jiu-jitsu community, I will say, and I'm sure you notice this, it was a real bummer seeing a lot of people's kind of either true colors or just ignorance. I think a lot of it was ignorance. I think we, for a long time, thought jiu-jitsu was like the intellectual martial art. And then I've seen a bunch of people post, and I'm like, you might not be racist. Like, are you guys just dummies? Did you think before you typed that? Yeah, like, I think you're just like dumb or whatever. But something positive that came out of this, and I'm sure you've noticed it as much as I have, I've discovered a lot of really cool people. And I also feel like I've become closer to those people than, look, I was never going to be buddy with Gordon Ryan, right? But I feel like the camaraderie that comes from struggle, and this isn't my struggle, it's just me being like amplifying where I can, but being in the struggle with people and fighting against injustice with people, I'm like, oh, I would take a bullet for you. We've never met, like so many of people of color, of women, of just people who have been vocal about these issues, I feel such a stronger camaraderie than just, you know, like in some world champions like Facebook group. I feel like there's a lot of closeness has come, even though somehow it seems like our side's a little outnumbered, and I hate to even say side or say that,
Yeah.
but I do feel like the good people are starting to like find each other. That's what this podcast has become, you know?
Oh, no, exactly. I mean, hell, we found each other through this.
That's what
You
I'm
know
saying.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Through all of this. And
Yep.
so like with my team in particular, it validated for me selfishly that I'm doing the right thing.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
you know, but it also validated how highly I think of the people that train with me.
Yes.
Because I'm like, these guys get it.
Yeah.
They're all with it. Nobody's ditching me because I did this. In fact, we've actually gained students.
Good.
And I've got hordes. There's not a lot of black people that are doing jiu-jitsu in the grand scheme of things, like black Americans.
Yeah.
And I've got hordes of these people. Like, I had always wanted to do a martial art. I stand for what you stand for. I've got people like, I want my kid to learn under somebody like you. Even if they don't. And there's actually been a number of them. Domination squad. I'm not going to tell you which ones. But there's been a number of people that don't even necessarily agree with me when it comes to not necessarily social issues, but like political stuff if I've talked to them about actual politics.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I want my kid to learn under you still because I want them to grow up with an example that knows speak and say what you believe in.
Yes.
Stand up for yourself. And so it's more about like their principles than anything. Like, so I've shed a couple, like in the grand scheme of things, I've shed a number of people, and probably more than that have shed me. But outside of that, I'm like, cool, that just made my circle tighter.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, yeah, my last podcast on my other show was all about shedding toxic people. And I was talking about from your like life, but also your internet life is your life, especially with the amount that we check our fucking phones a day. It's like if you're constantly seeing negative bullshit, racist bullshit, questionable bullshit, it's like if it's not inspiring me to be better, or then I'm like, I don't want to see it.
No,
I don't want to. I heard someone describe yesterday, like when you watch the news or when you watch your Twitter feed, it's essentially meditation because you're getting zoned, you're getting pulled into it. So it's like, I don't want to meditate on trash. I want to see people who are inspiring me to be a better person. Yeah, to speak for what I believe in. I feel like I asked Spriggs this when he was on the show, but what's your advice for people who, and most people have already kind of drawn the line in the sand and left. But for people who are like, I don't feel comfortable at my gym, or not even don't feel comfortable, but just the ones who are disappointed with their gym's response to all of this stuff, or their instructor posted some dipshit meme, do you think they stay and try to make it a better place? Do they bail? Are there more schools like you that quite honestly just don't get the fucking attention? Like I said, like I didn't know who you were until like all hell broke loose. And now I'm just like, if jiu-jitsu was my career, if I wasn't trying to be a pro wrestler at 40 and moving to Austin, I'd be like, if jiu-jitsu was my career, I would be like, you would be in my top 3. We're like, oh, do I move there to train? Just because I feel like more than, you know, even like famous instructors, is like if you have a coach that you vibe with and inspires you as a human being, you will perform better than a lackadaisical, indifferent coach who has a bunch of gold medals.
Yeah, like I care. You know, it just so happens I don't like fully like suck at jiu-jitsu. I just try to suck a little less every day. You know what I'm saying? But honestly, my advice for people, I'm like, if it's not like your instructor works for you. You don't work for your instructor, and people need to quit forgetting that.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, hey, if their values don't align with your values, bounce. Yeah. Bounce. Check places out. You know, go and cross train. If your coach doesn't let you cross train, that should tell you enough right there.
That's a fucking red flag. Right.
Huge red flag.
Dude, when I would get back from no matter where I trained, Marcelo. I've trained with famous instructors who, if I came back and I was like, oh, I learned some cool thing from this guy, they'd be like, let me show you why that doesn't work. They'd kind of have to like assert dominance. Marcelo Garcia, best in the world. I would come back from training. I came back and trained from fucking Hodger, from all these people. And he was like, he would be like, show me. And I'd be like, blue belt or purple belt. And he'd be like, show me. Like what? And it's like, that's how the best in the world fucking
That's me. I'm like, I tell them, I encourage them. I'm like, go cross train so we can steal their moves.
Yes.
Like, literally.
Yes. Oh my God.
Like,
speaking of that, when I rolled with Hodger Gracie, because he knew I was a Marcelo guy, he put me, he's so big with his giant legs. He put me in X guard and then he just goes, ha ha ha, Marcelo. And then he like launched me across the room.
That sounds about right.
One of my favorite jiu-jitsu moments. But yeah, the customer thing, that's huge.
That's the thing. So I'm like, they work for you. So I'm like, if you don't feel comfortable there, like you're paying for a product and a service in a sense. So I'm like, if you can't get it at Target or CVS, you go to Walgreens, you go to wherever you got to go to get it.
Or you go support the fucking indie mom and pop shop who's posting Black Lives Matter shit on their Instagram.
Exactly.
That's where the soul is.
Yeah, that's where it's at. And I'm like, cool. If you're going to feel like you have a family, I mean, you've shed blood, sweat, and tears with these people. So if you're going to feel like you want to have a family, then go find your family.
All right. Let me ask. There were two just like straight jiu-jitsu questions.
Sure.
That I want to get your take. Okay. So this is a good one. So this is from Jay Fresh. How do you start developing your game? Quote, I recently got my blue belt, so obviously I'm not great at anything, but should I start focusing on the things I'm already better at? What's your take on this? I have a thought.
I think that at like the white blue level, like honestly, you don't know enough to not know that you don't know enough. Like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So honestly, I would say roll and keep training. And then as time goes on, start paying attention to the places where you find more success.
Yep. Start
paying attention to the positions that you end up in more often, and then drive those home.
Yes.
You know, like that's when you start sharpening those swords. For me, when I was a white belt, there was like this other guy in NorCal that was like really, really dope. And we were both winning all this stuff. So I went against him and he kept harassing me on the back. Like I finally got to go against this guy. I was like, I'm going to kill him and be the top NorCal white belt. Yeah. And then he took my back like 4 times in a mat. Yeah. So I was like, you got to be kidding me. Took silver. That Monday, coach is like, you know what you got to do, right? And I was like, oh, here we go. Yeah. So I sat down and then everybody was on my back and I had to escape. Everybody's on my back. I had to escape. So it taught me a lot about what people are looking for when they're trying to escape, which conversely taught me how to attack, to distract, and to bait, and to walk people into my traps. So now I'm a back taker. So
that's great.
You know, it just came from positions that I was in often. So I would say
it's like a superhero origin story where it's like you were wronged and then you used it to
for the good of society.
Yeah. So I agree with you. You know, it's funny. I think most coaches would say, you know, do everything on both sides, play every position. No. I got really lucky coming up with Marcelo, who only does stuff on his good side. Like literally, I don't know how to play single leg X on like, you know, on one side of the body. I remember it did backfire once. I ended up getting silver. I lost in the finals of my first competition because I could only pass to one side. And this left-handed motherfucker just flopped his knees to the other side. And I was like, I don't know what to do.
The game has changed.
Yeah, and it was just like, I think he had got an advantage somehow, and it was just a horrible 0-0. And I still think about that. I'm like, I should have just fucking cartwheeled over that motherfucker. But my game developed because... So for me, I need like positive coaching. I don't do well with the bad cop. I don't do well with the, what are you doing? Then if my coach says, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going home is what I'm doing. But if I see people start to like, and this isn't good, this is all ego, but if I see people start to like circle and like watch me roll, like, oh, I'm about to do some fucking fancy shit. If I have a guy be like, a coach be like, you can get out of that, or like, I'm out. So I do really well with positive affirmations. So when I started to find, and I was very bad for a long time, like I didn't tap anyone until I got my blue belt, because I was at Marcelo's, I was old and I was small. And so I was get technical. And so my game developed from I started to kind of catch some guillotines, and then I got a little reckless, and I would like poorly catch guillotines and then like get my back taken or get my guard jumped over. But I was like, there's something here, because I wasn't getting anything else. I was like, I couldn't really armbar, I couldn't really Kimura. So I was just sort of backed into a corner of like, and we weren't really a leg lock school. Like maybe I would have gone towards leg locks then. But I was like, okay, my knee cut, I'm getting pretty good at. I'm starting to catch these guillotines. And then I just went ham on like, how do I get to these positions? And now it's like I tap everyone from guillotines from like crazy ass positions, because it was kind of all I had. So you can, if there's something you just, and then conversely, there were times where I remember I trained with Kyle once, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to ask Kyle all this half guard stuff, and I'm kind of small, so I'm going to be a half guard guy. Retained nothing. Where I'm like, you know what? I thought it would be for me, and it's not for me. And my half guard game now is essentially like shoving the guy's head and standing up. It's not good, but so it's also like accepting that you're going to do certain things at certain times in your career, and some things just aren't going to work for you. And some things that you didn't think would work for your body type is actually really going to work for you. And that's going to surprise the shit out of everyone else. And like, so that might be your thing. But I think a lot of it is just like following your gut, following your intuition. And fucking what you said, which is just like, everything's going to suck for a while. And just like running towards the fire.
You start seeing like, oh, I get in this position a lot. All right, start drilling that position more. Like start figuring it out. Like, okay, no matter what I do, no matter where my game goes, I always end up in this spot. I'm just going to keep doing that. I'll keep working on that.
Yes.
And that helps. And it might evolve, like for me, I end up, because I became a back taker, nobody wanted to give up their back. So then they started turtling. So then I started attacking that. Then that went from, okay, well, don't turn your back near Dom at all. So then everybody's like, you know what? I'm going to stay flat on my back. So then I just started stepping up my side control game.
Yeah.
So it just starts to evolve, and then you go into different pieces.
Isn't that the fucking best? I love nothing more than when I'm about to roll with someone new or good, or like a fucking UFC guy, and the coach goes, watch out for his guillotine. And I'm like, you almost made it easier by warning him. Because I'm going to find it. Because, you just get used to. And that's another thing. Don't give up. If you're like almost catching arm bars a lot and not finishing them, keep going for them.
Thin line between almost and actually just getting everybody in the gym with you.
Yep. Because, like, I mean, it really does happen just like that. And maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm romanticizing it. But, like, looking back, it's like there are days where you're just like, I guess I'm a back taker now. And it's just like, one little tweak or just confidence.
Oh, 100%.
Okay, there was one more straight jits question. I think it was maybe similar. Okay, this is from, where'd he go? Oh, there it is. Noah the Parisian. How about the COVID basement guys? It's just me and my best buddy training. Oh, you're going to be great for this question.
Oh,
I'm a blue 1 stripe, and he just started before the plague and is a white with 2 stripes. We train twice a week and study videos from Gracie Combatives and BJJ Fanatics. Any advice or training formats you recommend? Did you start in a garage, by the way? I think one of your fans wrote me.
Yeah.
You started?
Yeah, I started in the garage.
Okay.
So ashes to ashes, dust to dust, that I ended up spending the last 7 months in a garage again after all that time.
I know. Was it kind of like nostalgic though?
Oh, dude, it's been the most memorable time ever. Like,
I'm so glad.
So I don't think people realize, like, social media will do that, but everybody thinks I'm like this like jiu-jitsu competitor or whatever, just because they see like the cool pictures with lights at like Fight to Win and stuff.
Yeah.
Shout out to Fight to Win and Team No Sleep, by the way.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm a hobbyist that competes a lot, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
Like, I've had a full-time job the whole time I've done jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like, all 14 and a half years of this time, I've always had a full-time job. So COVID is the first time, because my job was jiu-jitsu, it's the first time ever that all I had to do was just train.
And just love it.
And just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so it's been an interesting experience to get up and I'm like, oh, time to get my sweat in.
Yeah. I mean, what a great fucking reminder. Like, I've got to train at some beautiful, Florian's gym's beautiful, the art of jiu-jitsu, beautiful. Yeah. But then I think about when I first started jiu-jitsu at this weird little strip mall with a broken bathroom and trained under a blue belt. And I'm like, easily the best experience of my life.
Right? My original garage experience, we were training in the garage. We'd move out the GTO and then put the mats down. Then we upgraded to the living room and we moved the pool table out of the way. Like that was like comeuppance where we're like, we have one extra mat. Let's go inside.
Are we millionaires?
We're balling now. And we're over here winning tournaments, just tapping people out, just running through people out of the garage.
And again, that so much of that comes to fucking attitude. You feel like you're in a fucking martial arts movie. I mean, some of the main things I learned from that fucking blue belt when I was 17, I still remember, I'll hear, I heard this the other day, the Daredevil, the bad one, the Ben Affleck one, the Daredevil soundtrack. We used to train to that. And it was all Evanescence and like just fucking, but I hear that and I'm just like, it stops my heart. Where there's
Leonard
something
Skinner, Pink Floyd, Def
there's
Leppard.
something so special about those times. And again, if you're with the right group of people pushing each other, I mean, shit, you guys could have been winning and your technique might not even been like as good as the other guys, but there is something about being in the shit together.
Oh, my technique definitely wasn't as good as those guys. I just believed in myself more.
Yeah.
I was like, I got something to prove because I can't afford to go to a floofy gym or like accredited academy. Yeah. I'm in the garage.
We can't all afford living rooms where we have to move the pool table.
Exactly. So I'm I grind while they sleep because I sleep where I grind. Yeah. So I was like, okay.
So that's the first piece of advice that we kind of like talked around, which is like, enjoy this experience.
Absolutely. Have fun with it.
Dude, if I had the chance to fucking sit out a bunch of warm-ups and just like train with like a homie in a garage and do whatever the fuck I want and like just like push each other, it would be the last time I trained was in a garage. I trained with fucking Florian and Ryan Hall in a fucking garage in like some stranger's house in fucking Santa Monica, and it was better than any class I've taken. And I mean, it was Ryan and Kenny, but it was incredible,
Yeah, I trained in a garage this morning. I literally was teaching a couple of my students. Like I was just working with them on some stuff. It turned into like a little mini workshop.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So practical advice, because I have some thoughts and we may disagree with this. Practical advice on like the video training, what they should be doing in these sessions.
I would message my instructor for point, because everybody's style is different. So it would be easy for me to be like, hey, go on the Domination Martial Arts Academy and look at all my stuff on YouTube. But not everybody rolls like me. Right. So I'm like, talk to your instructor and get suggestions on who, as far as videos, who they should be trying to emulate.
That's
if it's not them.
Oh my God, like such good advice.
I'm like, you gotta, because you want to still keep it within your house.
Yes.
Of whatever you've been learning up until that point. Right. And then, ask them for drills or ask them for like your instructors are going fucking nuts right now. They should, if they care, would relish the thought of being able to help you and being able to keep you hungry and being able to rely on you coming back when this thing is over.
Right. I mean, dude, we've had a lot of fucking, I've talked to a lot of like big names on this show, and A lot of people have had this, you know, different wordings of the same advice. I have never heard that advice. That is so good. I'm going to give that all the time because, yeah, when it comes to videos, it's like, I mean, I'm a little guy and I have a shitty guard. But so if I'm just like watching like fucking rubber guard videos and stuff, it's like,
It's not gonna.
that's
You're
not
not
good.
gonna be watching Ryan Hall and getting everything you need from him.
Right.
You, even though Ryan Hall's brilliant.
Or, by the way, Ryan Hall, however, we have very different games. Ryan Hall's teaching instruction.
Absolutely.
My triangle from blue belt is pretty much like a 95% finish rate because of Ryan Hall's old DVD series he did with Steph that looked like it was like done in like a fucking like porn room.
In that like pink, purple.
Yep. Yeah, it's just missing like neon lights and fucking music. Right. And because the way and when we roll too, the way he describes stuff, whereas I hear John Danaher, who is like the most renowned instructor for good reason, and I'm like, I space out. Because it's my ADD. Like I don't do well with that type of instruction. I did well with Marcelo. I did. So it's also that, you know, your instructor, let them point you to, hey, stylistically, you're kind of starting to do a Marcelo thing or a leg lock thing. And then you figure out
your learning style.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people, if they watch Danaher and they're like, I don't get it, they're going to think they're wrong. Because they're like, but he's the best coach. And it's like, maybe not for you though. Maybe it's a YouTube guy you've never fucking heard of. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know who's going to vibe for you.
Exactly. So I think that's like a huge one as far as videos go. And obviously asking your coach for drills, which can also bleed into the whole like videos thing. If you're seeing, you know, if they've suggested that you watch Kaio and Kaio's got some drill videos online, then you're like, all right, cool. This works into my learning style. I'm going to go with that. Yeah. So I think that's a huge one. For me, being in the garage the last few months, I was only rolling with people that had shit to lose. So I was like, oh, your family's asthmatic? Oh, you're being careful. Here, let's train. Right. Oh, you're a first responder? Okay, you're getting tested on the regular. Hey, let's train, you know? So but it sounds like this guy's got like a partner in crime. So I'm like, don't teach the lower guy. Don't teach the lower belt anything that you don't fully know yet.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, I was just going to say it, but I'm going to ask it to you because when I gave this advice, it was like semi-condescendingly to a girl I was dating where she was training. They had like a little white belt COVID squad and they were training in the garage and she would tell me these stories of like these white belts like trying to like run things and watching like heel hook videos on YouTube and shit like that. So my advice, I was like, that's insane. Don't listen to fucking any of them. Stop watching videos. I think, but you as an instructor, correct me if this is going to start bad habits. I'm like, if you're a fucking blue belt and a white belt, or if you're with a bunch of white belts or a bunch of blue belts, I kind of just think you should fucking roll. And like, you should warm up, you should do some cardio, and you should just do rounds. And if you get stuck in a place, go back to that place and start to like triage it yourself. And if, you know, I mean, if you keep getting caught in like certain spots, sure, maybe hit YouTube and be like back escapes. Or I actually really like Gracie Combatives. Like Henner gave me a password like a long time ago, and like their attention to detail and basics and bringing
it's solid. I love their teaching style and structure. It's
really good. And man, I don't know if you've gotten to roll with them, but insane. I don't think I've ever rolled with someone who felt like fucking Hiram. But I almost am just like, man, now's the time just to like, I'm not saying go for broke and kill each other, but like teach yourself how to fucking flow roll. Teach yourself how to do 10 rounds in a row. Because if you're just sitting there correcting each other and watching like fucking YouTube videos, I think you should just be fucking just warm up, do rounds, go for a run, call it a day.
Well, I semi agree. I think it's kind of a blend of both of what we're saying because for me, you know, I'm like, well, not everything's tech, but you're not going to get, and not everything's rolling, you know? So like have a little bit of both. Like what we do, we've had 4 days and for the most part, it was like structurally unstructured. Yes. So basically we'd show up, we'd stretch, we'd shoot the shit, we'd roll.
Yeah.
And then it turned into.
And to be clear, I was talking to like you're a bunch of goony white belts, not like you have a black belt or you have if there's a fucking purple belt there, even if there's a 4-stripe blue belt, it's like, okay, you can do some fucking, they can show you some things. But I'm like,
well, that's the thing though. Like even with them, I'm like, you guys aren't professors.
right.
Like you got, like I said, you don't know what you don't know. So I'm like, roll, have fun, roll, you know, make sure it's a pace where nobody's getting hurt, but just chill and roll. And then when you guys see these spots, like try to recognize when you're getting to a spot like, oh, you keep putting me in the Americana. Oh, you keep taking my bag. Oh, you keep doing this. All right, now it's time for tape, drills, email coach, DM coach real quick to see what's going on. You know, so you get the happy medium. Like for us, we turned it, ours, it evolved. So it started, hey, just roll. Then it turned into, hey, let's do a little more tech. We haven't done some tech in a while. Then it kind of blended into, we do 2 days of tech and rolling, 1 day dedicated to just technique and 1 day dedicated to just rolling.
That's
so we get, so it's literally half and half and we're getting everything.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's fucking perfect. And that's another reason I'm a huge advocate of warm up a little and open with like flow rolls.
Yeah.
And then you kind of just see like what you're feeling. It's just, God, it's so hard to like convince people like what flow rolling actually is.
That's because you make too much sense. You
You
can't be spewing that these days.
I literally will be like, feel my arm. You feel how there's no tension, and then they're like, got it. And you just feel, and you're just like, God, fuck, it's the dad stuff again.
Yeah, I tell them, I'm like, if you feel any resistance or if you feel yourself resisting, stop. Yeah. Let it go. Let it go.
Well, dude, this was one of my favorite interviews. I could talk to you forever about social justice. We have so much more to talk about. I'm kind of tempted just to do a fucking part 2 next week when I get back from LA.
I'm all for it, brother.
But promote all your shit, like the school, YouTube, everything.
Absolutely. So the name of the school is Domination Martial Arts. You can find us in Concord, California, and in Walnut Creek, California. For now, Walnut Creek's closed because of the COVID restrictions, but Concord is open as of yesterday.
So where the fuck is that? Are you like are you south of the Bay Area?
No, we're East Bay. So we're east of the Caldecott Tunnel. We're east of Berkeley and Oakland.
Okay, cool.
So we're about 20 minutes from Oakland, about 40 minutes from San Francisco, assuming there was no traffic. But
I used to train with some of the El Nino guys, and we would go to there was like a vegan soul food place in fucking
that place is bomb.
Have you been there? Oh my God, it's fucking nuts. We just like went there after training. Yeah. Oh,
insane. They do it right for sure.
I know cities by their vegan restaurants and jiu-jitsu places pretty much.
Hell yeah.
All right, cool. So you're up there, and then for people who can't train you or can't train there.
So yeah, anybody trying to reach me via social media, my name is @Domination. It's spelled just like domination, except the ION is a 10N because the number 10 is my lucky number.
Yeah, if you want to see all that preachy black shit and no jiu-jitsu talk. When you told me that, I'm still a little livid. But man, I really think that I'm really glad we did this interview because I think that there was so much more hope. I mean, look, me and you could do an episode where we just railed on shitheads in the jiu-jitsu community, but it's like, people know. We know. Yeah. Like, I want to talk about how do we find the good people? How do we take the sport we love and make it? I mean, man, I'm sure you got these too, but I got probably at least 50 DMs from people who were like, I don't want to do jiu-jitsu anymore. Not just I don't want to leave my gym, but they were like, I want to stop.
They wanted to quit.
I mean, dude, I gotta be honest with you. I mean, I was feeling that way. I'm like, you know what? I can fucking defend myself in a fight. I'm gonna go hang out with some fucking pro wrestlers and like, but then the way this community built and meeting people like you, I was like, no, man, there's like, even talking to you, like I haven't rolled in a while because of COVID. I've just been like kickboxing and doing my weird wrestling shit. But like, even talking to you about this, I'm like, oh, I'm like hyped to train. Like, I just want to find a good place to fucking train. And like, yeah, I got hyped, but it's easy when you just see so much toxic garbage online just to be like, well, give jiu-jitsu a break. But I don't know. I think we need more good people.
Oh, absolutely. I think a big thing about jiu-jitsu is like the art of the tap, because the tap doesn't mean that you lose. The tap means basically, hey, my life was in your hands and you gave it back. Good looking out.
Right. Good
at
looking out. I love that.
You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, when you see somebody in the street that has a jiu-jitsu shirt on, you know, hey man, I don't know you, but I can trust you with my life.
Bro, I was in the Lincoln Center AMC in New York City on a date and fell backwards down an escalator because I saw some big dude behind me with a fucking Alliance shirt, and I went to give him the fucking shaka, and I like stumbled down the elevator. It was so fucking
that's the
ridiculous.
thing. We like clamor for each other.
Yes.
So I'm like, so anybody that's like having issues with their gym, having issues with their comfort zone, you know, find a family. Like, don't quit jiu-jitsu. The art did not fail you. People can fail you, but the art's not failing you.
Ugh.
So find a gym. I've got students that have been coming to me from other schools, asking me like, how do I make a transition, whether it's to my school or to anybody's school. Yeah. I'm like, just do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Dive in the water. Don't just dip your toes in. Like, you're gonna know that the water's fine.
Yeah, you can also, like, again, practically, you can pretty much like peruse a place's Instagram and tell pretty quickly if they're shitheads or not.
Yeah, you know exactly what you're in for.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, like when I was like, I don't follow a ton of people on Instagram, but when I was like looking to see if I would follow back, I was like, you got a BLM thing? All right, we're good.
Right?
Dom, you let me know if you know anybody in fucking Austin, because I'll be making that transition in a couple of months, and like I never really found a home base in Tucson, and I fucking miss it, man. I mean, hearing you describe it, like, it made me think of Marcelo's, it made me think of my first gym, and it's like it's a very special thing when that happens. And I really do think if you find a solid jiu-jitsu family, not just a place you go to fucking work out and like ignore the horrible things said in the locker room, but like that fucking family where like you could go to your coach and be like, yo, I just got dumped, man. And they could be like, come to the back. Like that kind of fucking place.
Exactly.
It's so special. And like, we got to make jiu-jitsu great again.
That's what we're doing. Has anybody made the hat yet?
I was just going to say, my manager started to make merch for me. I was like, oh, that's the Rear Naked merch. But then I'm afraid that when you see that make jiu-jitsu great again, some racists will be like, yeah, but getting rid of the blacks. And you're like, no, the opposite.
No,
That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. So it would have to be very clear. It would have to be like fucking like Malcolm X holding the sign.
Or you just make it a black hat.
That's dope. That would actually, aesthetically too. That would look
sick.
Or like a little fucking fist.
Hell yeah.
Like a cartoon black fist. Well, I can't make that, but you can make that. I can't.
We got
unless I donated all of my profits to like your parents. Dude, thank you for everything you fucking do. It's so important. And yeah, let's figure out like next week or very, very soon come back on.
Absolutely. We'll make it happen. Shouts out to everybody. Shouts out to my team. Like I said, Domination Martial Arts at Domination, DOMINAT 10N.
Oh, and then
Instagram and all my other handles.
YouTube? Do you have YouTube stuff?
Yes. So I have a Domination Jiu-Jitsu Academy site on YouTube, so you can go to that.
I want to check that out.
Spelled the same way with the 10 in it, and you can find all my stuff on there. Bunch of instructionals and fun stuff there too.
Awesome. Well, I don't have a team right now, so also for me, shouts out to Domination Martial Arts. All right, brother. I'll talk to you.
Hey, there we go. There we go.
The computer froze. I just thought my last joke fucking tanked.
Much.
All right, brother. See ya.